Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, taking my stab at predicting what this Florida State depth chart is going to look like heading into 2025. The first thing that stands out to just about everybody, there's a lot of red in this depth chart, meaning their transfer portal additions. What should fire the Florida State fans up the most is you went out and made transfer portal additions at the exact positions that you needed to address. I think every Florida State fan that watched every single football game on Saturday said, hey, this offensive line, not nearly good enough. I mean, this was an offense that was bottom in the country running the football, bottom in the country protecting the passer. When you can't run the football and you can't hold up in pass protection, you ain't going to have very good offense. Florida State fans figured that out in 2024. Mike Norvell certainly saw that, not only making a massive change with the coaching staff that I think was some really good hires, but more importantly, or just as importantly, you go out and completely retool the offensive line as well. That's where I want to start. But I want to go through this depth chart and just talk about what it might look like going into the 2025 year. Before we get into it, as always, most importantly to the Florida State fans, you could poll 100 Florida State fans that follow this team very closely. You'll probably get 100 different depth charts, a lot of different ways that this could look coming into 2025. Let it fly in the comment section. That is kind of the beauty of doing this, is we got to get to take a look at where we're at, and I get to hear from you guys in the comment section. So let it fly. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. Without further ado, let's get into this one, and let's start at the offensive line, because I think that was the one thing that completely needed to be overhauled going into 2025. And you got to give Mike Norvell a little golf clap. This was really, really effective. And it's not necessarily bringing in a bunch of guys that are going to be first-round NFL draft picks, but you brought in a bunch of guys that have played a ton of football. And you just go top to bottom. Gunnar Hansen, he's a 3-year starter in the SEC coming into his 4th year of starting at Florida State. Adrian Medley started every single game for UCF in the 2024 year, played damn well. Luke Pettibon, he's an all ACC caliber center coming from Wake Forest. Micah Pettis, multi-year starter in the SEC coming from Ole Miss. Every single transfer portal addition that Florida State made on the offensive line, bona fide, proven contributors at the Power 4 level. Outside of that one guard spot where, hey, Richie Leonard's played a lot of football, TJ Ferguson might look a little bit different going into year 2 with the program. This is going to be a completely different offensive line, but you feel pretty good that this is going to be a solid offensive line. Now, the question that I think a lot of Florida State fans have is, hey, what does the depth look like? The depth was a problem for Florida State, not only in 2024, but even going back to 2023. Is Lucas Simmons ready to play if necessary? Can Jacob Brizzi slot in at a lot of different spots? What does TJ Ferguson look like going into 2025? Look, when you want to win 12-plus games and you want to make runs in the college football playoffs, compete for an ACC championship, and you want to play your best football in November, depth along the line of scrimmage is huge. I look at the starting 5 and say, I feel dang good about the starting 5. What do the next couple of guys up look like? And if they need to play, can they come in and play and not be a liability? That's probably the question you have going into spring practice. Now, going back up to the quarterback spot, look, let's have an honest conversation about Thomas Castellanos. I don't think he's going to come in and be a first-round NFL draft pick. He's certainly not going to be a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. This is what I'll say about Thomas. Gus Malzahn knows him well. Mike Norvell knows him well because he coached against him a bunch. Those are two really smart offensive minds. And they clearly looked at Thomas Castellanos and said, that's the guy that we want to build our offense around. They got him locked in early. He's not going to be an NFL draft pick, but he fits exactly what Gus Malzahn wants to do. And sometimes when you're talking about college football quarterbacks, finding the right quarterback that fits what you want to do is more important than having a really high upside NFL caliber quarterback. We see some really good NFL caliber quarterbacks play in programs in an offense as a college that don't really fit them and don't have a ton of success. Being a good college football quarterback has very little to do what's your NFL draft grade. And I think Thomas Castellanos is a really good fit. Running back position. Give me all the stock I can get in Usman Kramoa. I think he's the most complete running back in this running back room. I love Cam Davis. Cam Davis, a downhill, thick lower half. I want to run through people and attack the line of scrimmage. You have a guy like Jalen Lucas, who I probably should have put in the depth chart, but didn't really know where to put him, that can be really dynamic in space. I think Usman Cremo is a guy that checks all the boxes that you want in a running back and looks physically ready to play as well. If you were to talk to me about true freshman that comes in and makes an impact, let me buy out that stock for Usman Cremo. Wide receiver room. What I love most about the wide receiver room is this year, as opposed to last year, you have proven production. Last year when we talked about Florida State, we were fired up about Malik Benson. We were fired up about Hakeem Williams going into year 2, but it was all projection. It was all, hey, what can they be if they put it all together? Well, we saw in the 2024 years, not really any of them put it together. And obviously there were a lot of other problems with the offense, but the wide receiver play was certainly one. Now, you still have some high upside guys, Hakeem Williams, Elijah Moore, but you also have guys like Squirrel White and Deuce Robinson, who we've seen with our 2 eyes play pretty solid football. And that's not to say Deuce Robinson doesn't have another gear to reach, because I think he does, but he can play. Squirrel White can play. They've been productive at the Power 4 level. So I feel much better about the wide receiver room, and I'll feel really damn good about it if we start hearing about caveat, because we heard about those guys last year too. Once we see Elijah Moore and Hakeem Williams start to maybe play some good football, this wide receiver room could be dangerous. Tight end position, Landon Thomas, probably the guy that I'm looking at the most. Randy Pittman, sneaky good blocker. I think there's a reason Goss brought him over from UCF. Overall, the offensive line, you have more boxes checked than you did last year. Going over to the defense, this is the unit that I'm most excited about. I think the Florida State fans know, there ain't many people higher on Tony White higher than I am. Followed Tony White for a long time. I am a massive fan of what he can be as a coordinator. What I love most about this, you got a bunch of guys that fit what Tony White and Terrence Knighton want to do in the front seven. You look at the Tony White defense, 3-3-5, quote unquote, but they're going to mix it up. They're going to give you a ton of different looks. There's going to be 3 down linemen. There's going to be 4, sometimes 5. You go back to the Nebraska film, a ton of different looks, moving guys all along the line of scrimmage. Now, if you want to have a successful defensive line under Tony White, you got to get guys that are versatile. I look at Jason Jenkins, guy that could play on the edge, guy that could play the 3-tech. I look at Deontay McCray. I look at Demonte Diggs. Very similar conversation. Guys that played out on the edge, guys that can play on the inside. The second conversation is, do we have those true big body noses? Darrell Jackson's the first one that comes to mind. Getting him back was huge, especially with this Tony White defense. Another freshman that I'm buying stock in is Kevin Wynn. Kevin, I don't love having to rely on true freshmen to play along the line of scrimmage going into their first year, especially at the Power 4 level. Kevin Wynn's a different cat. This is a straight up human refrigerator who's also a really good athlete that has a great first step. Not only can Kevin Wynn do some of that dirty work early and kind of do some 2-gapping, hold up some double teams, he's also a guy that can be a disruptive force. Sign me up for Kevin Wynn being a contributor early on the defensive line. Going back to the linebacker room, it's not going to be an elite room, at least the way I look at it. I don't know if you have a guy that's a bona fide top 50 NFL draft pick. Getting Elijah Herring's huge, though, because last year you just didn't have proven commodities outside of DJ Lundy. Elijah Herring comes in and say, hey, we know that he's probably not going to be a top 100 NFL draft pick, but we know he, at one, has played a lot of football and can play pretty dang good football. Now, you have some upside with a guy like Caleb Lavelli, a guy like Blake Nicholson, who are young linebackers still developing, but at least you have some veteran guys that can play the off-ball backer spot. Jack position, probably should address that more at the defensive line. I think Stephon Thompson, probably your day one spring practice starter. A lot of experience in terms of what Tony White wants to do. Played with him at Syracuse, followed him to Nebraska. Amari Williams, I love to see them give a shot to Amari Williams on the defensive side of the football, especially at that Jack role. Think he could be great. The secondary is really the only position group that Florida State didn't really address in the transfer portal. And quite frankly, it's the only position that I think they've adequately recruited at the high school ranks. And so you didn't really need to. Even when you lose guys like Cypress and AZ Thomas, the secondary should look like the rest of the Florida State roster, where, hey, we're losing some really good players, AZ Thomas, Fentrell, Cypress, but we feel good about the guys we've recruited stepping up and kind of refilling that production. Whether it's Charles Lester, Kai Bates, can Conrad Hussey take that step? Edwin Joseph, I like. Quandarius Jones, I really like. That's how it should look. Now, can Mike Norvell get the rest of the depth chart to look like this over the next couple of years where you're going to lose some good players, but you can retool with your high school kids? That's going to determine if Mike Norvell makes it in Tallahassee or not. That's my depth chart. Would love to hear from y'all in the comment section. A lot of different ways it could come together. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.